Hi everyone, my name is Bert. I'm a GB faculty member, and today I will introduce the topic of the Japanese regional bank's operation in the ultra low interest rate and aging population environment. So basically, this will not be in very in-depth analysis, but at least I will introduce you with some kind of data, and I will address what kind of research problem that we just need to pay attention on. So the research about regional bank is quite interesting because when you look at the environment right now in Japan, so I would say it's pretty hostile since the level of interest rate is pretty low and it's close to 0%. So that's why this will be very difficult for commercial banks in Japan to make profits. So let's look at bank classification in Japan. So on the top of the pyramid, we have 5 city banks, which are MUFG, Mizuho Bank, Regional Bank, Saitama Regional Bank, and Sumitomo Bank. Basically, these banks are, I would say, national banks and also have some operation overseas. So they are big bank. But the topic that I will pay attention is regional banks 1 or tier 1. So there are 64 regional banks 1 right now across Japan. But it's quite challenging because when you have these 64 first tier regional banks operate, they mainly operate in the prefectures that they are located in. So for example, I live in Akita Prefecture, so there are a few banks in Akita Prefecture. One of them is Akita Bank. Mainly, Akita Bank will focus on operation in Akita Prefectures, not somewhere else. Even though Akita Bank might have the branch in Tokyo, but it's not by much. They don't focus on expanding their business in Tokyo, but just for maybe some convenience, so on and so forth. And they will have very close relationship with SMEs. So SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises or business, and also government, because they will provide financial services, advice to SMEs and also government. So this will be kind of like the bank of SMEs and local bank. So look on the map. Okay, so if you look in Akita, it's on the top right. So we are here. Okay, so we are here. So basically right here. And I don't know where you are, but you can just spend a few seconds look at what are regional banks in your prefecture. Okay. But I would say this is quite interesting when you look at the map because when you look at prefectures, for example, like in Okinawa, which is on small island here. So there are 2 regional banks operate in the same prefecture. And the reasons that I said is quite interesting. This is because in Okinawa, it's not like a populated prefecture, but we have many, many banks, okay, operate in Okinawa. So if you look in Fukuoka, for example, this is also a very interesting case because there are 4, okay, there are 4 regional banks operating in Fukuoka. And this is kind of like role models, but I don't think I have much time to discuss about banks in Fukuoka. So let's look at some economic conditions or environment. So why are they not appropriate or it's not suitable for commercial banks to make profit? So first of all, we will look at the money supply, which is represented by M2 and M3. Basically, the money supply is the amount of money that the central bank in Japan, which is the Bank of Japan, use as the tools to stimulate economy. One example, when you look at pre-1990 crisis, so you can see the level of the percentage change in M2, okay, it's quite large and it's close to 12%, but after 1990, so this change dropped dramatically. Okay, because we had the financial crisis in 1990 or the financial asset bubbles. Okay, so afterward, so you can see the trend that is quite flat, except the toward I would say in 2020 for the COVID-19 period. So you can see the Bank of Japan utilize aggressive monetary policy to stimulate economy again. So that's why this will lead to some negative impact, which is going to be on the next slide. So you can look at the basic rate or the call rate. Both of them can represent the interest rate in Japan, which is quite low, okay, since 1994. Before 1990, these 2 rates were very high. So if you look in 1990. Okay, so the rate is about, let's say, 6 to 8%. But since then, those rates plummet dramatically and stay close to 0% since 1996. Okay, so which means that the interest rate are about 0%. So which means it is quite difficult for commercial banks to attract savers, right, to put money in the bank because the rate of returns on people's savings is close to 0%. Okay, so that's why this will prevent bank to make profit from lending. Okay, this is one challenging from having the Bank of Japan using aggressive monetary policy. So let's examine regional banks' balance sheet in 2019. So we need to look and compare between assets and liabilities. So let's begin with assets. So main business of commercial banks, you just need to make loans, right? So you can charge interest and then this will cover with bank operations and the rest will be profit. So in 2019, so on average, if you look at regional banks tier 1, so loans and this bills discounted, okay, account for, roughly speaking, 64%. Okay, 64%. But the next biggest category is security. When you look at securities, I would say this is quite dangerous for commercial bank to hold securities because this asset is quite risky and it will fluctuate. Okay, the value of securities will fluctuate. It depends on the economic conditions. So if it's good, I mean the price of securities will be high. But if we experience with some kind of negative impact, for example, like in the COVID-19 pandemic, so the value of securities will plummet a lot. So that's why this will prone to a decline in asset value. Okay, and if you look at the percentage, it's about 20%. Okay, that regional banks tier 1 hold as the assets. So the rest about 12%. So regional banks hold cash and due payment from other banks. So let's just mean for liabilities. So the biggest liabilities of commercial banks, so of course this will be deposits or our savings, okay, because we are entitled to get this money back from commercial banks. So that's why, okay, this is the biggest. Well, look at a bigger picture. The Japanese Banker Association reported in 2019 the total outstanding deposits for all 64 first-tier regional banks were about 278 billion yen. I mean, that's a lot, right, for a deposit. But what about the income, okay, that commercial banks receive from the interest earned from lending? This was about 3 billion yen only. Hopefully, you can see the difference between the amount of deposit. I would say 280 billion yen, okay, but you receive the interest only 3 billion yen. This is very small, okay, I would say it's very small. And most commercial banks will have some difficulty, right, to survive in the business. Another factor that might come into play, okay, I would say after 1970s is the demographic change. So let's look at the demographic change. I will focus on two categories, so which are young people and old people. So for young people, look at the third column. So this is 0 to 14 years old. Okay, it's 0 to 14 years old. So from 1970, so you can see the trend is declining from 24%, okay, 24% down to 23.5. And in 2019, so the young population reduced to 12%, which is half of the level of it in 1970. So this is quite a big challenge because it means that Japan will have less workers in the future. Let's examine for working group, which is the next column, 15 to 64 years old. Basically, this is also show a declining trend. So from 69% in 1970 down to about 60%, okay, which is like 8% decline from 1970. So this is a concern, okay, at least for me. And I would say the government and also the Bank of Japan also look at this as a threat since we need more labor, right, to increase the economic activity to produce and drive the economy to grow. Lastly, The second category that I was concerned in demographic change is the aging population, and this is defined by people who are 65 years old or above. Okay, so in 1970, it was only 7%, but over time, so this proportion of aging population keep rising, and in 2019, it was 28%. Okay, 28%. This is almost like fourfold, okay, from 1970. And by the way, if you look at the UN definition, so when a society or a country experience a total of the proportion of aging population exceed 21%, so that society will call a super age society. So which means Japan already experienced super age society, I would say since 2007. Okay, 2007. Nevertheless, that is just the national trend, okay, for 28% in 2019. But if we look closely for prefectural level, okay, so which prefectures will have the highest aging population? So don't be surprised, Akita. I mean, I feel sorry, but Akita have about 35%. And if you compare 35% aging population to the national level of 28%, Akita prefectures already surpass, right, national trend. Okay, this will be a huge increases in aging population. So the second oldest, I would say, would be second oldest prefecture, Koichi, and followed by Shimane. Okay, and the lowest aging population, surprisingly, Okinawa. Okinawa has only 21% of aging population, followed by Tokyo and Yokohama. There must be some kind of strategies because this will reflect regional bank will have faced low interest rate environment and also experience aging population. By the way, why aging population will have negative impact on bank's operation? So let's think about this. When you are young, right, you just have more energy so you can make income and you just want to buy many things. You want to consume many things. You want to buy a car or maybe cars. You want to buy a house. You just want to take a vacation somewhere else and you just need to spend a lot of money. However, when you're getting old, I mean, you just have some kind of health issues that prevent you from active activities and you probably demand less for products and services. However, there might be another challenge that you still demand for public health care. Okay, this public health care will increase the burden on, I would say, public spending. Okay, on public spending. And they will have less and less demand to borrow money. So that's why in the prefectures that experience highest aging population and less young people, okay, live in that prefectures, those regional banks will have some challenge, okay, to consider. So what are the solutions that regional banks take action? Well, what they can do for now, they can diversify their portfolio. So for example, instead of making loans, I mean, many regional banks in Japan start to look for high yield, okay, or high returns investment, and one of them is CLO. Okay, by the way, CLO is collateralized loan obligations, which is quite popular in the US. And yes, Japanese regional banks purchase CLO in the US. Fortunately, those regional banks purchase CLO that is almost mature, which means it probably mature within a year or two. That is quite safe. However, it doesn't mean that it's going to be risk-free. Okay, that's why if something bad happened to the economy, like COVID-19 pandemic, so this might reduce the value of the financial assets that regional banks in Japan purchase, and this will be deteriorate, okay, bank health. Look at the net business profit, interest on loans, securities, interest. Net business profit show quite clear trend that is downward slope since 2015. And also interest on loan, which is the red series, is declined, okay, from here, right, 2009 to 2019. But if you look at securities, so it seems that the returns or the interest earned from securities increase gradually. Okay, increases gradually. So which means that they just need to find a better solution, right, to offset the decline of interest on loans. So otherwise, regional banks will encounter some deficits, right? The problem is not solved yet, but we still have another challenge, which is the Japan Post Bank. I mean, Japan Post Bank has some advantage over regional banks. So first of all, Japan Post Bank operate across country, right, through the postal office, and you can look at the ATM, right? So you can do some financial services, deposit money, withdraw money at the ATM. So that's why Japan Post Bank will not have the constraint to operate in any specific prefecture. So they can increase their clients across country, which is different, okay, which is different from regional banks. So look at the total deposits, okay, of all Japanese financial institutions, okay, for all institutions. Well, by 38%, this will be possessed by 5 city banks, okay, which are big banks or national banks, and 21% held by Japan Post Bank. And if you look at these two proportions, okay, the sum is already exceed 50%, which is kind of like a huge proportion, okay, fall into these two categorized banks, okay, and the rest must be split among regional banks tier 1 and tier 2. Look at the responses from the government. So back in 2020, so Prime Minister Yoshida Suga, he already mentioned something that in his own opinion, he thought that there are too many regional banks, okay, because when they have many regional banks, so they're going to compete, okay, to get the savings, okay, from the limited population in the prefectures. So that's why this will deteriorate bank profits. So that's why Prime Minister Suga, he's tried to send a signal or some kind of message, okay, to Japanese people that it's kind of too many banks. And I would say his intention is to reduce the number, but the government will not take the action, okay, but at least the government will make something easier for regional banks to solve the problems, okay. It's one way. So they amend what they call the Anti-Monopoly Act, because in Japan, like in the US, have Anti-Monopoly Act. So this try to prevent, okay, so the business will do the collusion, okay. They try to combine with other business or other firms and try to obtain the huge market share. So otherwise, they can make some extra profits or have some kind of market power. Okay, so that's why the government has this Anti-Monopoly Act. But since the regional bank's health, okay, it doesn't improve much. So that's why the government will amend the Anti-Monopoly Act and allow regional banks to realign the business through M&A. M&A is merger and acquisitions. Besides regional banks, so the government also allow bus company to do M&A. So that's why this environment will make things easier, okay, for regional banks to combine. And if you recall, I looked at Fukuoka, and Fukuoka has 4 regional banks in the same prefectures. This is one of the examples that regional banks in Fukuoka, okay, is just from FGG, okay, FGG group, that they're gonna combine their operations. They're gonna be using the same management style, the same IT technology, so they will use the same management systems, which hopefully this will reduce the cost of operation. Okay, so this is a strategy from M&A. So the FSA and the Bank of Japan, so I will turn toward to the financial market. So the Financial Services and Agency and the Bank of Japan, so will provide some incentive, okay, for regional banks who want to merge or who want to ally the business by giving some rewards. And this reward is extra interest, which is about 0.1% on the current account deposits held at the central bank, which is the Bank of Japan. Okay, so hopefully this will be some kind of financial incentive to encourage other regional banks to follow the same footstep as FGG. Well, from the problems and statistics that have been showing so far, so hopefully you can see some problems that regional banks in Japan are encountered. So first of all, they have experienced a decline in demand for borrowing, which from demographic change. So they also experience with extra player, which is the Bank of Japan. The Japan Post Bank, okay, which can operate across countries. So the question would be, we just need to find a way, right, to reevaluate, okay, what are the impact of the aging population on regional banks' profit. So, and also the effects of the Japan Post Bank, okay, with the new player in financial market. Okay, so how this will impact regional banks. Okay, so hopefully this will stimulate you to think about what are the problems that regional banks will be encountering in the future. So thank you so much for your attention.